right, we are gonna ruffle some feathers again today.
What?
Because we are talking about Britain's most hated subculture. This is from a creator, Jimmy the Giant. I've seen a few of his videos on other on some American topics. He does a lot of great video essays. Just haven't really checked anything out from like British stuff. I wanted to save that for here. So I just know that the thumbnail had what looked like to be a football hooligan or ultra or whatever. And I figure we've kind of built our channel checking out stuff that they do.
Yeah.
So,
I'm here. I guess I want to have my learning hat on today. I don't know. I want to absorb as much as I can.
We'll see. We'll see, man.
Let's do it.
3, 2, 1.
Callousness of the hooligans.
Police had to intervene to control the fans.
Disorders on the rise.
History of bitter rivalry between their supporters, the West Ham.
One of the world's most deadly football tragedies.
This small faction of society has been seen as one of the most controversial subcultures in all of Europe. The football hooligan.
It's not just a football, it's a whole subculture, a scene. And for the first time ever, I was accepted.
Exactly the same as us to go to the match with our boys, meet us and have a good scrap, you know what I mean?
You don't hurt at the time because the adrenaline keeps you going.
Well, before the football hooligan became its own subculture with its own fashion and attitude, violence in football has been there ever since the beginning. Around the 13th century, football started to become a sport. Two neighbouring rival towns would assemble what was pretty much an army of men in what was referred to as mob football. Between the years 1314 and 1666, over 30 football bans were put in place, with the main issue being the violence and the rioting that would come with it. But you see, gradually football would begin to change. Around the late 1800s, football had kind of slipped into the hands of the gentlemen. And with that was the introduction of modern football, with a rule set called the Cambridge Rules. It was now no longer a sport of the rioting common folk, and instead the sport of the ruling elite. But yet that didn't stop the violence. The first recorded instance of football hooliganism was in 1885, where Preston North End faced Aston Villa. The teams got upset and just started whacking each other with sticks and having a fight. A handful of instances like this would happen, but then England would go to war. Twice.
Hostilities will end officially at 1 minute after midnight tonight.
Post-war Britain was a very different place than before. In the 50s, we'd start to see a rise in these young youth subcultures, such as the Teddy Boys. By the 60s, you had the mods and rockers, as well as skinheads and hippies. Some of these different subcultures would be violent towards each other. They broke away from traditional British values and rebelled against British cultural norms.
Well, I suppose I'll be married. I don't want to get married, but I suppose I will.
At the same time, the UK was experiencing a massive wave of immigration post-World War II, with the change in demographics brought with it racial tension and violence. And so, in this time, the English identity was in flux. And as well in the 60s, mandatory military service for young men came to an end. And so young working class men had very few places to let out their aggression. But then there was football. Every single week, you and the boys could get together and go and watch your team play. This was an opportunity to get together with the boys and drink and occasionally get into a scrap with the opposing fans. And what started as just a bit of fun towards the late 60s and into the early 70s had really evolved into a class of people who were typically white working class men who would assemble these gangs associated with a football team. These gangs would become very organised and referred to themselves as firms. Arsenal had the Herd, Millwall had the Millwall Bushwhackers, West Ham had the Intercity Firm. Each team would start to develop their own firm and they would become feared.
So it's like gangs around football.
Pretty much. They're not going to war anymore for the England, so they are going to go to war with themselves, their rival teams. I mean, I know a little bit about, you know, the mods versus the rockers from watching Quadrophenia. I know that's a big thing over there. But, you know, translating that into, you know, sport, man, that's a whole other thing.
It's like everyone has the pent up aggression.
Yeah.
And football is the catalyst that gets it out.
Yeah. Like when we checked out the the one about the oil firm up in Glasgow, Celtic v Rangers, the term of a 90-minute bigot was brought up a lot. And I said then that I used to not get why you're so aggressive then, but that the rest of the week you're so chill. I get it now. You know?
Yeah, you're just it's all that pent up anger, man. The angst. Yeah. You get that shit out and you're like explode. But then it keeps you sane for the rest of the week.
Right. That way you're not doing it in a Tesco or around the water cooler at the office.
Yeah. Could you imagine? So it's interesting. It's like, I guess it's, it provided unity and belonging to a group of people, this kind of sense of community and family that probably wasn't shown towards them from big country, right?
Right.
And you rally around what you know, and football clubs. That's like the perfect place. Like over here, we have that sort of mob mentality, but we would call them gangs, and they block by block because we don't have football clubs.
Right. I mean, we have, NFL teams, but like we've discussed on this channel before, two opposing teams fans can sit next to each other and live together in harmony and peace and not beat the shit out of each other.
Yeah, pretty much.
Well, except in Philly or Boston.
Yeah,
but that's a whole other thing.
Fuck Philly. I just no, I would definitely, anytime anyone makes comparisons, I would say leave the NFL out of your mouth. Talk about college football. That's
that's where the tribalism comes in.
That's a more realistic comparison.
Yeah,
because that's different.
Oh yeah. That's true. Don't go to Alabama and mix up, Alabama's. Make sure you know which team you're supporting before you say "Roll Tide, roll."
Yes, 100%.
Yeah, that's just one example, though.
Man,
but that's another video.
A lot of people were wondering how this started. Some people believe it's in part due to the fact that the elder generation stopped going to football games. As they were becoming wealthier, there were other things for them to do, and football stopped being this family affair that everyone would go and watch, and really became a young man's pastime. And so with no elders to keep the young fans in check, they became more aggressive and more violent. Hooligans developed this deep pride in where they came from. A lot of it came down to respect. If they didn't feel respected, they would prove themselves by fighting the opponents.
You know what I mean? If you ain't doing it on the terraces, you're going to be doing it somewhere else. It's just that violent streak.
No, it's not a violent streak. It's being proud.
Being proud of your man.
Being proud of your man. Don't let people take the piss out of you.
The attitude of most of these hooligans weren't really to go out and seriously hurt the opposition, but rather to just have some drinks, go watch football, and have a good scrap.
All we're going for is a good game of football, a good punch up, and a good piss up. That's all about Millwall.
It was a break from their monotonous lives. Now, when they would come back to work on Monday, they'd all have stories to tell. Like how Barry took on 5 geezers with a pint in his hand without ever spilling a drop. Every week, they would go out fighting for their city, their town, their club. It gave them a purpose and an identity.
When are you going to settle down and get married? Settle down and get married? Well, getting married, you're restricted, and you can't travel away with a team you love like, And I was going to get married, but I knocked it on the head, all over Millwall.
But very quickly, things started to get out of hand. Before we go further with this video, I want to give a shout.
Before the whole sponsored thing, that's wow. Yeah, like avoiding getting married just so you could follow your team around. That's dedication right there.
That's borderline insanity. But then again, like that's the football culture that you can't explain to us because it's so foreign of a concept.
Yeah,
like we have nothing to compare that to at all, other than actual like fucking war. Like that's pretty much it.
You do see the occasional fan that will follow, say, I don't know, the New York Giants around, or the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, or go to every single baseball stadium. But that's more the exception, not the rule here in America. That is seen as kind of weird.
Yeah, that's like,
Over there, it's seen as that's normal.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah, you didn't get married? Oh, me neither. Oh, why? Oh, because football. Like, fuck yeah. You know?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, I maybe you can compare the Swifties to them. You know?
Swifties.
You know, with their fever that they follow their queen out there.
Yeah.
And so that's it. It's just so wild of a concept. It's so like alien to me because there is nothing comparable.
Right. Right.
But we've checked out a ton of stuff, and it's slowly started to make sense, right?
We're less and less shocked by it now with every video. Like we're almost used to it by now.
Yeah. And I'm just like, okay, I get it. It's out there. It's wild. It's violent. It was violent, and they reeled it back in. But the spirit of hooliganism is still there. You know,
Still
as
alive
far as uniting the ultras.
Yeah.
Ultras are not hooligans, but hooligans, I guess, that weren't able to hooligan turn into ultras.
With
With their fucking flares. Every man, that I was like, the flare shop making a killing. Who's ever selling flares, never going out of business.
Oh yeah, they have financial security forever and ever.
100%. Yes, yes. Oh man.
Way back to the video.
150 were arrested well away from Stamford Bridge when they ran riot on the London Underground.
Into the 70s and by 1974, Manchester United were relegated into the second division.
Fans on the field again, spilling over from the corner on my right. And I suspect that we shall see the referee calling the players off. Yes, he's taking them off.
The Red Army firm caused carnage around loads of stadiums all up and down the country. That same year, a Bolton Wanderers fan stabbed a young Blackpool fan. Football hooliganism was getting out of control. Public sentiment was turning against football and starting to see it as a massive problem. So football organisers had to try and do something. They took measures to try and limit the crowd size. They segregated the home and the away fans with fences, but nothing was really changing. Up until then, football hooliganism was mainly just a problem in England. However, in the mid-50s, the European Cup was introduced, and for the first time English football supporters had a chance to get the boys together, pat their lagers and head to war overseas.
There we go.
For Europe, the invading British mobs brought violence and destruction. For many of the hooligans, these were the most exciting times of their lives.
It was kind of how I imagine the Vikings must have felt going out, getting to a country and just going absolutely berserk.
And with this, they would spread what would become known as the English disease. Very quickly, issues started to spread abroad. In 1975, Leeds United were banned from playing football in Europe after their fans had an all-out riot after a game against Bayern Munich. Manchester United were banned after 1977 after fans were rioting before, during and after their cup-winning game against St Etienne. But you see, football hooliganism wasn't just being contained to the football grounds, but the hooligans would start to develop more organised criminal behaviours, such as looting high-end fashion brands. This in and of itself would develop a unique fashion for football hooligans, as Gary and the boys would come back to England dressed in the finest after the football games. This fashion would be dubbed football casuals.
You used to see a lot of the majority of the fans wearing the shirts, and then you get this small group of look like, you know, big, strong looking men. They used to be the ones that sung the most as well. They used to start the songs off, and back in the day, the only time you saw Stone Island was at a football match, pretty much, I'd say. To the point where if you saw a group of lads wearing Stone Island and CP Company, or something along them lines, they were fair game.
Whilst every other football fan would just wear the team's uniform, the football casuals become very distinct and able to detect, wearing brands like Sergio Tacchini, Fila, Lacoste, Pringles, Stone Island and many others. They'd often have the skinhead buzz cut. These lads would be dressed to the absolute nines every single football game and then get into massive fights.
Wow, so it's like the opposite. Like if you see someone dressed really nicely, you better run the other way. They're gonna mess you up.
Crazy. What? Okay, I'm there for it. I'm just like, okay, man, I'm learning, dude. This is so fucking interesting.
And that whole thing about in the 50s when the FA Cup, or the Europeans Cup, sorry, was formed, and then the Brits went over and messed stuff up. I'm like, and you call us uncultured.
Yeah, I'm just saying, you know, I'm just saying, man, over sport. But whatever.
Yeah.
We all had to do it, I guess. You had to get that pent up aggression.
I'm just saying, don't come at us for stuff that you were doing already.
Yeah, pretty much, man. Pretty much.
Phew. And comment section floods.
Pretty much, as expected.
You spark out. Who's you playing football with? They're casuals. Casuals?
It would be in the 70s and the 80s that would be considered the golden era of football hooliganism. The media coverage was in full swing. The UK was in a massive moral panic over football hooliganism. Things were starting to get more and more out of hand, and they started to turn political. It was around the same time where large parts of the skinhead movement had been overtaken by far-right nationalist groups. Things like the National Front and the British movement. These groups would lurch onto their more tribalist mentality and patriotic nature, and a subsection of hooliganism become linked to far-right extremism.
Where organisations like the National Front would deliberately try to recruit new members from football terraces.
I do want to point out that Vice made a whole video on this, and there's a lot of criticisms of that, saying that football firms tend to just represent the attitudes of the town they're from. So if a town is very right-wing or very left-wing, the hooligans will tend to represent that. And so football hooligans weren't inherently far-right.
That went through your window.
If y'all want us to check that one out, leave that in the comments while you're tearing us apart.
Yeah,
you know?
And it's a Vice one, so that's probably where's that going to go? Probably Patreon.
Well, we've done Vice stuff on the channel before. The old firm one that kept up. So
keep your eyes on the Patreon, guys.
Yeah, at first, but it'll be on YouTube. Come on, man.
Eventually,
have some faith.
None. I have zero. That's how I live life.
That's why you relate to our biggest audience better than I do. I still love them though.
Like, I hate all of us, including myself. So hey.
Sorry, Grandma.
Oh, that way.
That one.
As I got to the gate, I got hit over the head with an iron bar.
Either way, the British public was in full disarray. The middle classes of Britain had developed a very deep hatred for this subculture that were often working class people who were seen as out wreaking havoc on towns on a weekly basis. It was a massive moral panic, and due to the sharp rise in unemployment in the 80s, there was a deep resentment in the working class, and you could see that in things like the miners' strike and the Tottenham riots. There were deep tensions in Britain, and football became the main vessel to channel that anger. Things were getting...
Yeah, and I was about to say, and this is the thing I was trying to say earlier, we got a glimpse of that, you know, in the 70s, the whole culture shift and the rebellion against the British people through the Sex Pistols documentary. How, you know, that culture of, you know, belonging and, you know, wanting a better life, and, you know, was on full display there. And that was just a cross section of that going along with what was going on in the 70s.
Yeah, man. Anytime you offer a release, you never really know what's going to be released. Does that make sense?
Right.
Like, or how big it's going to be, or how small it's going to be. Like, and so football became a scapegoat for a lot of angst and built up tensions. And it just boiled over. It boiled over, got out of control.
Yeah. And it's still that way in the 80s too. And
they went through their time, man. They went through their time. God,
they
damn.
sure did. They sure did. And what was the movie that we checked out?
Green Street. Was it that?
No. This is football. This is England. This is England.
Yeah.
That's the one we checked out where a lot of this was on display as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Man, that was good.
Yeah.
And pretty bad. Someone would need to come in and put an end to it.
Bearing now Mrs. Thatcher as Prime Minister.
1985 was considered the worst year ever for football hooliganism. There were a few key instances that would really push the Thatcher government to act. On the 13th of March, Millwall and Luton would face each other.
31 people were injured when Millwall fans went on the rampage before, during and after the match.
Described as one of the worst nights of violence in British football, the Prime Minister is demanding action.
and it turned into a riot that destroyed Luton. 81 people were injured, 60 of those being police officers, 31 arrests were made, fans tore up the stadium, they destroyed the town, they were smashing people's windows. One police officer suffered a heart attack, they had to receive mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, all whilst being kicked in the head by football fans. Ooh. But it would be on the 29th of May where disaster would strike.
The Heysel Stadium in Brussels, the capital of Belgium, has been a sickening and bewildering sight. As a result, there is for certain serious injury when a wall collapsed, and maybe worse.
Liverpool played Juventus in the European Cup final at the Heysel Stadium, where 39 people would be crushed to death by a wall that collapsed as a result of fighting.
I would like to say to all the English people that they are very famous in the world for their education and self-control and so on. We have now the proof that all over in continent, everybody say, don't be like English people.
What I see? After Brussels, the world shuts the door on English clubs. Today, the governing body, FIFA, registered their disgust over the events at Brussels by banning English clubs from all internationals.
This ban lasted until 1990 and a year later for Liverpool to be unbanned. The UK had had enough.
I wish we could get those responsible, get them before a court and stiff sentences so that they stop anyone else.
Soccer violence has now reached the top of the political agenda.
And so the Thatcher-led government set up a war cabinet to tackle football hooliganism. Along with the Popplewell Committee, many ideas were put forward and laws passed to try and tackle it. You had the Public Order Act in 1986, which permitted courts to ban fans from stadiums. The Football Spectators Act in 1989 banned convicted hooligans from attending matches internationally. Stadiums were forced to make changes. They were no longer allowed standing sections. They had to have seats, along with much tighter security, better quality turnstiles, and tickets were made much more expensive.
Heysel and Hillsborough changed everything. Hillsborough more so than Heysel because it changed the design of stadiums. It's a kind of...
Oh man, we just checked that one out. Well, it was from your channel. We re-uploaded it to ETS, but you know, going through that, man, that was conspiracy.
Freaking dude, unacceptable.
Unacceptable.
Yep.
Yeah. And I mean, before that, like, yeah, it made sense that the Thatcher administration would put those steps in place to combat it, because you know
it's unfortunate because they brought it on themselves. That's because you don't ever want to get the big government attention,
right?
You never want that. So they were spiraling, and what is the big government going to do? Fucking be strict.
Yeah. But at the same time, maybe that could be seen as ignoring the bigger issue of, you know, unemployment, and other things that could be seen as, you know, virtue signaling.
Yeah. Well, they're just gentrifying football.
Yeah.
And I'm like, did it stop the hooliganisms? Yeah.
Yes and no. I mean,
but they just moved it elsewhere.
Yeah.
But football as a whole won that battle.
Yeah. It's still to this day.
Yeah. I mean, because you still have like the Premier Leagues. That's a high standard. The standard for football is all over there. Like it's nowhere else. And it's because as a whole they fixed themselves.
Right. And it was around this time, like 1990, that the Premier League was started to be a thing.
Yep.
That's what I learned from the whole history of Premier League, I guess.
Yeah, tried to. Oh my God, that was a video. My God.
Yeah. We'll link that at the end of this one.
Hell yeah.
Of social cleansing of football, a deliberate pricing policy that has pushed hooliganism, they thought, to the back burner.
But you see, the violence didn't stop immediately. The firms just got more organised and smarter and moved the violence out into the streets, where firms would become like militia groups, knowing how to ambush people with the locations they were in.
These back streets, I knew it were good for us because we knew every back street where they were going. Away things didn't know where they were going, but we could.
However, into the 90s, the English disease slowly started to cure. After the European ban was lifted, families actually started to attend football games again. Police presence had massively grown and they'd become much more equipped to deal with the problem. Hooligans were getting tougher and tougher sentences, and violence did start to drop.
There's over 4,000 Germans booked in for Europe this summer. You come and take us out with your top firm, then you can take us on tour.
As things started to really quiet down by the late 90s, by the early 2000s, a nostalgia grew for football hooliganism.
There's nothing different about me. I'm just another bored now approaching 30 in a dead-end job who lives for the weekend.
Great movie.
With films like The Football Factory, Green Street, The Firm, as well, a very scared Danny Dyer did this show called The Real Football Factories.
Mate, you sure we're going to walk in this booze? We're going to end up getting ironed out by this little firm, you know what I mean? Yeah. But you seem sweet as, but it's early days yet, you know what I mean? I'm sure someone's going to glass me in a minute. I'm only joking.
Bless him.
Yeah, that's another series for the Sunday slot.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah. I was thinking, like, we're starting out with Guy Martin, this one, and we have a few other ones in there. So if y'all want us to do football factories, comment that down below as well. We've told you 3 times to prompt comments. So
yeah, the comments are going to be so long, and I'm fine with that. I'm fine with reading them.
That's fine. That's fine. We may not acknowledge them, but they do get read.
Oh, 100%.
Yep.
Books were being written and ex-football hooligans became famous. A romanticization of this era really grew in the mid-2000s. The football casual aesthetic had become a staple in fashion and can still be seen today. But football hooliganism never went away entirely.
But in Russia, they're trained, organized, and brutally violent.
England arguably exported hooliganism abroad, where instead of having firms, they call them ultras, and it appears that they are far more violent and intense than most British firms.
We all went there to show that the English are not hooligans. They're just posers. They're little girls.
Russia seems to have this hatred against England, and they want to prove that they're better than us, which led to the UEFA riots in 2016 between Russia and England. And football firms still exist, and there has been a bit of an effort to like organize these fights and make them a bit more legitimate, which personally I think is a pretty good idea. All of this has led many psychologists and sociologists to study and pin down what causes football hooliganism.
And hooliganism emerged when there were lots of uncertainties about identity, uncertainties about place, even uncertainty about gender identities, with the emergence of hippie cultures and new ways of doing masculinity.
Not really knowing where you belong and what have you, so I was attracted to the togetherness as well of all the lads,
It felt normal, plus you felt as if you had a family.
For the first time, probably felt like I belonged somewhere.
At the core of what drives these men are the same exact things that drive men to protect their countries in war. It's a powerful energy that comes with it a lot of responsibility. When carefully nurtured and directed into something positive, it can be amazing. But when it's not, it can be terrible.
The violence of English football fans brought about the death of 38 people and injuries to 454.
Yep, pretty much. Yeah. And that's just a universal thing across the world. When men don't have a purpose, they descend into not so savory things.
No, we turn back into fucking cavemen. And then you just group attack. And then we go back into our old way. Give us a purpose. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head, I think. And it's just unfortunate that football got wrapped up in it. Football was the scapegoat of all of it.
Yeah. It would have been something else. It would have been another sport. It could have been rugby. It could have been Formula One. But it was football that was the scapegoat.
Yep. Right? Crazy. And these are the little layers that we peel back here. Understanding the culture across the pond is just little by little. It makes more sense. It's just piecing another little piece goes into the massive puzzle.
Exactly.
I don't think we'll ever have all the pieces.
No. We barely have all the pieces of our own.
No, very true. Very true. Yeah. I purposely threw mine away. Pieces. So that way I'm always searching.
There you go.
But yeah, man. No, this was a great little, man. This is a great video. I like this.
Yeah. Jimmy the Giant does really great video essays on not only British culture, but also American culture, a lot of pop culture things. Yep. So if you've got more, this is our 4th prompt. Put some more of that in the comments below.
Yeah. Why don't you comment?
Yeah. Have I not made that clear?
You should comment to comment, guys. Jesus. At this point,
just throw an emoji down there.
Yeah.
It all helps engagement.
Hashtag comment. You know.
Anyway, thanks for watching, y'all. Somewhere around to subscribe and watch another video. What should they do after that, Dan?
Unplug and go watch some football.
Exactly. We'll see y'all in the next one.
Later, guys.